enter new director Peter Clifton, born in Sydney, Australia in 1941. Unlike Massot, Clifton did have experience shooting music for film, from a 30-minute short on Australian band The Easy Beats and their 1967 UK tour to Sound of the City, a series of performances including the Rolling Stones, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, Donovan, Pink Floyd, and many others. This is how Jimmy Page became aware of the director's name, as he certainly captured the rock and roll excitement to the best of his abilities. Now, Led Zeppelin was supposed to be on this film, as Clifton shot some footage at the Royal Albert Hall 1970 performance, but Jimmy never liked the result, thus they never signed the release. It's a bit strange though, Clifton was called in for The Song Remains the Same. He was surprised to get the phone call, never mind a 5-hour meeting with Led Zeppelin in London. The director pitched his idea of what the movie should be, script and fantasy sequences included. An agreement was made and he was hired in March 1974 at Peter Grant's house, Horse Lunges. Now, I've seen the pronunciation for this place as Horse Lungs, but that doesn't make sense, so I'm sticking to Horse Lunges. Peter Clifton's final script was signed off and the new director was promised to be treated as an equal partner in the film. Fantasy sequences were resumed at Plumpton Place, built in 1568, located in East Sussex, not that far away from Jones's residence. Jimmy bought the property in 1972, and its lake was featured in the movie. First we have two swans that resemble the band's future Swan Song logo. Next, there's a handheld shaky camera movement that culminates with a shot of Jimmy playing a type of hurdy-gurdy instrument next to an acoustic guitar and a tape recorder, as you never know when inspiration may strike. We can see director Peter Clifton checking out the location, looking for ideas. Scarlett Page and her mother Charlotte enjoyed a beautiful sunny day at the property. Now, Jimmy's home studio was also captured on film. It was discarded from the final release, but traces of it can be seen on yet again the 1990 promo video for Traveling Riverside Blues. I find the footage and pictures fascinating because if you ever wondered what Page looked like recording his demos for The Song Remains the Same, The Rain Song, or 10 Years Gone, this is the closest approximation you'll get. If this shirt looks familiar, well, it's the same one from the backstage sequence at Madison Square Garden. Talk about continuity, right? Possible reasons why this portion was discarded may have something to do with Dazed and Confused featuring the violin bow solo. The video of Jimmy carefully recording guitar layers probably didn't match the sinister sounds of Madison Square Garden. Next, it was Peter Grant's turn to make great use of his antiques collection. The idea was to shoot him with wife Gloria driving around. The crew was extra careful with his 1930 Bentley that was used on the movie. We can see them exiting Horse Lunges into the rural scenery. A second day of shooting features Zeppelin's tour manager Richard Cole joining Grant for some old-school business tactics. Horse Lunges is more prominently featured here with several shots of the manor house built in the 15th century. Peter Clifton's script included a scene where Grant's hitman would pay a visit to powerful businessmen. You'd think this was shot in close proximity to Horse Lunges, but no. It was some 19 miles or 30 kilometers north. Hammerwood Park was a country house built in 1795. With a long history of distinguished owners, it was left to rot past the Second World War. By 1953, it was empty. Who would want to buy this property? Well, Led Zeppelin did in 1973 through an auction. This is one of the most fascinating yet bizarre parts of their story, and it's rarely mentioned by the media. It's a lost building in the Zeppelin universe. The band intended to build a recording studio here, plus housing accommodations. Their love for Headley Grange turned into having a place of their own in the middle of green surroundings. Where Genesis had the farm, just imagine what Led Zeppelin could have turned Hammerwood into. Their development plans never took off, and the site kept falling into pieces. From roof problems to water leaks, it was a mess. The band put it up for sale in 1978, and it wasn't until 1982 when it was purchased by David Pinnegar for renovations. While it was a challenge from day one, countless efforts were made and they paid off, and it has been open to the public since 1983. So all these being said, this is where the shootout scene takes place. It was the right setting for the movie. Now let's move on to the indoor sequence, the location of which remains a mystery despite my efforts to identify it through various sources. It may well be Hammerwood Park, you know? The gangster scene finds four men gathering piles of cash moving power positions on what seems like a strategy or casino board. Items on display included action figures, outpost miniatures, glasses of brandy, and envelopes with Nazi swastikas. The four characters are a man with a funny-looking mustache, a faceless banker, a fitting representation of most bankers, right? And a wolfman that kinda looks like proto-Chewbacca way before Star Wars went into production. And maybe a nod to music host Wolfman Jack, who was fond of Led Zeppelin. This can also be a reference to 1941's The Wolfman featuring Lon Chaney, a 1971 film Capulina contra los Monstruos, or 1943's Return of the Vampire. The last character is an old man with a scar that gets his head chopped off by gunpowder. His blood pumps out with similar colors to Jimmy Page's fantasy sequence. The effect included a fake body that stored the liquid surprise. I always find this man's scream to be quite absurd and funny at the same time. Peter Clifton took his work very serious, planning the scene and giving proper instructions to all four actors that remain uncredited in the final release. This opening sequence is the subject of many interpretations, from Led Zeppelin's rockstar power to Peter Grant dealing with ruthless promoters and shady characters ever since he got into the business. Bad blood, ego, and vengeance run deep in the music industry, making this scene a premonitory statement for the swan song years and the dark cloud building upon the band. Richard Cole's hat reminds me of the cover for In Through the Outdoor. Maybe it was a continuation of a hitman at the end of the road. Maybe I'm getting too philosophical. Or maybe I'm a Led Zeppelin fan. Peter Clifton had access to Joe Massett's footage and discovered most of it was shot 16mm instead of 35, despite using Arriflex cameras. The footage itself had no marks to determine where the audio track began or ended. Nothing. Synchronizing the footage was mission impossible, trying to determine where the video and audio was from. All 3 nights, both film and multi-track recordings were stored without any label nor instructions. It's just a worst possible way to have this in the archive. Peter Clifton's editors had to closely watch endless cans of silent footage with help from session players, as well as Jimmy Page, to determine what the music portions were. Despite the obstacles, the songs were almost completed using parts from different nights, which led to Peter Clifton's idea. Sorting out the existing footage had been a filmmaker's worst nightmare, but his proposed solution was even scarier. Quite unthinkable for a rock band. Reshoot the entire Madison Square Garden concert in 35mm quality at Shepperton Film Studios in London, where a dedicated crew would recreate their stage setting configuration from their July 1973 dates in New York City. But why Shepperton? One of Peter Clifton's editors talked about a Genesis concert film recorded there in late 1973, with some additional sequences shot for transitions. In short, it was a controlled environment, and Genesis managed to capture their progressive rock talents in great visual detail without the hassle of your average live setting. So we gotta thank Genesis for this. Recreating the lighting vibe of Led Zeppelin's New York 1973 show was a challenge, next to getting a proper wig for John Paul Jones, who cut his hair in 1974. They attempted to nail his July 1973 hairstyle, but the problem with this wig is the color. It looks kinda blonde, and it really looks ridiculous, right? The more you see it, the more it stands out for the wrong reasons. Robert's July 1973 jeans had to be redone as they no longer existed. They had to redo the artwork near his zipper. Quite the challenge it was. The movie's planning is a dimension by itself. They were lucky that technicians found solutions to these rockstar problems. Now, we have to thank the director of photography, Ernest Day, for his major contribution in the production values. Although his previous movie experience credits cite him as camera operator for Ryan's Daughter, The Horseman, and A Clockwork Orange, yes, he worked for Kubrick, and with John Bonham's obsession with the movie, I guess it was full circle. Ernest Day's eyes for aesthetic and design cannot be underestimated. Also, there is uncredited photography work by one Phil Parmet, who worked as cinematographer on Frank Zappa's Baby Snakes. Last but not least, we have British stage designer Ian Knight, who worked with the likes of the Rolling Stones, Genesis, Wings, The Who, and several free concerts at Hyde Park. He provided art direction and professional lighting design on the film. He was the right man for the job, as he joined Zeppelin on tour during the final dates in 1973. Here's Ian next to Plant and Bonham on their way to Pittsburgh on July 24th. We can also spot Ian on this brief footage of Robert Plant getting on a limo in New York that same day. Led Zeppelin's filming at Shepperton took place in August 1974, while Physical Graffiti was still in the mixing stage. A projection screen with the film was placed in front of the stage for reference. The band only worked on the incomplete portions of the film, meaning the gaps in the material shot at Madison Square Garden. But this didn't mean it was an easy shoot, as they had to pay close attention to what they played on that specific night, or nights where the material was taken from. So they had to do a little practice run and then roll the cameras so they could mime the parts to the sound of the recordings without their instruments run through the PA. Even though it was sort of acting, it's one hell of a task to recreate the concert. You have to concentrate, and I believe it's a way of method acting. You really gotta get into character and be serious about it. Their 1969 promo video for Communication Breakdown was different. You see the band having fun as they lip-sync their way through the song. Shepperton 1974 was a mighty challenge that only these guys were brave enough to attempt. So how to tell the Shepperton footage from the actual New York City stuff? I'll give you the hints. Because they shot it in 35mm, the image quality is better than the actual concert. Now, a word of advice. Once you notice the differences, you won't be able to see this movie the same way again. The songs may remain the same, but the pictures will change forever. Robert's teeth were fixed and his body mass index was slightly altered. See what I mean? Jimmy Page's hair was shorter, only slightly, but it's noticeable. John Paul Jones has that strange looking wig, and what a wig it was. John Bonham's body mass index was also different. I guess he was really enjoying his hard-earned money. His hair was also longer than it was in 1973. Now, because Bonzo had short hair throughout 1974, I sometimes wonder if he also wore a wig. I'm amazed someone could grow hair that long since the Swan Song parties in May. Also on the Shepperton hints is the stage itself. The background colors look blurred without the action we see at the actual concert. Lights are also farther away, and other lighting from MSG 1973 is not present. The mirror has a different height, probably to avoid reflection from the cameras and such. We also have a lot of close-ups that were just not possible like this in New York City. Despite the ambitious nature of the whole thing, the final editing job managed to effectively combine both sources. There's consistency in flow and color. You can check my in-depth analysis of the movie, both the Shepperton and London footage, on my Patreon site. You can find the link in the description below. Fantasy sequences were resumed with John Paul Jones's brief shot playing a traditional concert organ. This was not a movie set but an actual venue, Alexandra Palace, north of London, where Led Zeppelin played one of its concert halls on December 22nd and 23rd, 1972. You can see Jones wearing that confounded wig again. Quite the spectacle to witness that hairpiece. I'm sure he played no quarter in full organ capacity. But wait, there's more. The organ at Alexandra Palace, built in the 1870s, used to be known as the Windy Giant, but in 1969, the year when Led Zeppelin released two smashing hit records, it was disassembled and up for sale at a cost of £60,000. We can see all the spare parts waiting for someone to bring them back to life. The Greater London Council looked for a buyer, so this means the organ we see in the movie is actually a reed organ, put there to make it seem as if Jones was playing the venue's famous instrument. So there you have it. John Paul Jones is not using the entire system at Alexandra Palace, but a separate unit. This is a case of movie magic, creating an alternate universe where the building remains the same. One last scene was shot at Jones's home, where he shared an evening of storytelling with his daughters, and later was given a telegram by his wife. He was happy about going on the road again, but then he echoes the famous words, "This is tomorrow." His wig is also noticeable on these couple of scenes. Now, it's interesting only Robert Plant and John Paul Jones got these telegrams, as we don't see Bonzo and Page receive the news. Maybe Peter Grant communicated different with them. Telepathy, maybe? Next, it was turn for Robert Plant to venture into acting at Raglan Castle, next to nowadays painter and graphic artist Regina Parker, who was cast as Castle Maiden. It's her only credited movie role since then. Her onstage presence worked in favor of the scenes. She looked charismatic but mysterious at the same time. She was to be rescued by Robert, who did the best he could to free her from the evil guards. Not evil Gollum like Rambalon, but evil guards. Plant's wardrobe reminds me of his Holland 1972 outfit for some reason. With a fur coat, a sword, and his 1973 tour necklace, he managed to live the fantasy of his many Lord of the Rings references in Zeppelin songs. I think Raglan Castle was a good choice because it works as an extension of Dunluce Castle, the one we see in the gatefold for Houses of the Holy. Props to Peter Clifton's script. We don't know if he was inspired by this, but it all works in the Zeppelin universe. There was careful preparations for the scenes without Joe Massett's school of film. Robert also shot a scene with a bird that was sent to attack the guards. It reminds me of Kezar Stadium 1973. Instead of a dove, this is a killer bird. Now Robert Plant got one of the longest fantasy sequences, which seems to be right when you're the singer, I guess. Fun fact, Robert decided to wear a similar Celtic warrior outfit for a 2017 interview with AC/DC's Brian Johnson. But wait, his shooting activities didn't stop at the castle. Let's head out north to, let me pronounce this correctly, or at least try, Marionetshire Granite Company, where additional footage was captured on film. This site may feel familiar as it is the same area where many parts of Unleaded were set. Plant's love for these landscapes is absolute. The ocean and beach scenes were shot at Gwynedd, Wales, more specifically the village of Aberdowie. Robert's horseback riding on a black horse, not sure if it was the same Jumpel Jones used for his own sequence, was shot at the nearby mountains of Gwynedd. This is a Google Earth approximation of the angle. The film managed to capture very good images of these timeless natural colors. Led Zeppelin's movie project was finished. There were no more fantasy sequences nor Shepperton reshoots, but to get Peter Clifton and his staff busy in the editing room. Final mixes for Physical Graffiti were done by November 1974. Swan Song Records hosted a Halloween party, and you can check episode 3 of The Making of Physical Graffiti for this part of the story. 1975 had a busy start for the band, with 2 warm-up gigs in Europe before embarking on a 35-day North American tour. It was past their second show in Brussels, Belgium, where Old Grey Whistle Test own Bob Harris presented a brief interview with Robert Plant, who among other things talked about their upcoming film.
It's been quite a long time, Robert, since the last album. Why has it been so long?
We've been involved in a lot of things. We've been coming to a lot of conclusions and decisions and starting the record company off, you know. We also got mixed up in quite a gargantuous film.
The film, because I've heard a lot about the film, that's the American tour film, presumably. Are we going to be able to see that fairly soon?
Well, fairly soon. It's like... fairly soon is I don't know how long fairly soon is in most people's mind's eyes, but I shouldn't think it'll be too long now. It's virtually finished, you know. I think I said that about 6 months ago, but this time it is virtually finished.
What actually is it? Is it gigs?
It's 1 gig at Madison Square Garden, interspersed by what we would consider to be representations of how we'd like ourselves to be seen or off stage, you know, one way or another. And there's a lot of sort of waffle that goes on around the gig included there too. It's quite realistic for New York. Yeah. If anything is realistic in New York.
As we can see, there was information leaked into the press about their plans to conquer cinemas around the world, but the question remained, when? 1975 was a complicated year for Zeppelin on the road, especially Robert Plant's vocals. Please check episode 4 of my Making of Physical Graffiti for context. According to Peter Grant's Bring It Home book, director Peter Clifton had to chase down his payments and shared some personal lifestyle choices with the band, as he was now a close figure in the Zeppelin camp. He earned their trust and respect. Peter Clifton was a VIP guest at Earl's Court in May 1975. You wonder if he thought, my god, this should have been professionally recorded. Clifton never signed a contract because Peter Grant insisted he didn't have one with Led Zeppelin. What a tough spot to be in. I would have been worried about potential movie royalties with that kind of setting. Music films released by 1975 included Leonard Cohen's Bird on a Wire, Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, Leon Russell's A Poem is a Naked Person, the mighty Yes songs by Yes, recorded back in 1972, and Slade's fictional movie In Flame. Plans to shoot additional footage were to take place during Zeppelin's tour in the fall. Their September 5th show at Pasadena's Rose Bowl was promising, and setlist highlights like Kashmir could be a powerful cinematic experience. Now, like I said in my What If 1975 video, you wonder, had they shot Rose Bowl footage? What happens to the Madison Square Garden stuff? But unfortunately, all plans were scrapped when Robert Plant and his family had a near-fatal accident in Greece. Led Zeppelin went into a dangerous shock while trying to come up with a new working schedule. You can check the Making of Presence episode 1 for a deep dive on this stressful time period. Okay, now the question, why the name? Why the song remains the same? Houses of the Holy was one of the band's most diverse albums that reflected their catapult velocity into fame after Stairway to Heaven. Robert Plant realized the universality of meaning, the power of music as the source of inspiration for a generation who wanted to change the world, or at least enjoy the moment while it lasted. Ever since its 1972 live debut in Japan, The Song Remains the Same became something like a theme song for Led Zeppelin's travels and conquests. Because the movie was a music compilation of their first 5 album period, the name was a fitting title of world domination. There's also the fact that the Madison Square Garden show was 3 years old, and the band probably saw so many drafts and cuts from the movie, they had to be fed up with the sameness of it. Last but not least, the movie's title is a definite business statement, a political move in a sea of sharks and competitors, waiting for their demise to take over. The fact they didn't tour in 1976 gave other bands the chance to reign supreme in the rock and roll industry. While Presence may have been perceived by some critics and fans as uneven and quote the first letdown after a series of championship albums, I personally think it's one of their most rhythmically creative records. The best band of the 70s had a feature film surprise filled with classic hits and jams. In many ways, this was their true swan song, a version of themselves they could never come back to, but play variations on a theme, like the American society past the oil embargo days of 1973. A private screening of The Song Remains the Same was held with Atlantic's Ahmet Ertegun, and his reaction was, he fell asleep, but later asked who was the guy on the horse. Peter Grant was reportedly offended by this, and we can't blame him. They put so much work into it, Ahmet's reaction was a bit of a letdown. Now, the movie poster was designed accordingly to reflect the contents within, and I think it was heavily inspired by Pink Floyd's Live at Pompeii 1972 visuals. We see bits from every fantasy sequence plus Peter Grant and Richard Cole, while Robert Plant is the smallest member on the poster, and we can see 2 black horses including Jonesy's galloping buddy. What I find quite interesting about this poster is the starship image, which looks like the band arriving at the airport, and back to my theory from episode 1, I believe this is the group landing in New York City on July 27th, 1973. An accomplished design job to promote a film that was difficult to market outside of rock and roll fans, and also, it worked wonders in the negative color version with the message just as strong for black and white newspaper print. Both Led Zeppelin's logo and typography were designed by Hipgnosis back in 1973. It was a smart choice to bring them back after Physical Graffiti's weird font and Present's minimalistic style. Hipgnosis' own George Hardy designed both the movie and soundtrack images. He was of course the man responsible for Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. The building we see on the movie poster was based on the old Scala Theatre in Brixton Hill, South London. Most recent tenant at the time of making this video is One Tammy Gospel Center. As you can see, the facade looks quite abandoned, yet easily recognizable for any Zeppelin fan. Now there's a ritzy cinema and cafe in Brixton as well, which opened its doors in 1911 and also worked as inspiration for the design as we see the name Ritz on George Hardy's original artwork. There were rumors that Led Zeppelin conducted their 1973 North American tour rehearsals at the Scala Theatre, but no, it was actually All Street Film Studios in North London. Warner Brothers worked as a distributor for the film and shared their own press release on October 7th with instructions for ticket sales. With their previous distribution experience with the Woodstock documentary, Warner Brothers knew exactly what to do. A set of nowadays collectible cinema lobby cards were printed and ready to be shipped around the world. These feature several scenes from the movie, including John Paul Jones from July 29th and John Bonham playing his drum kit at Shepperton Studios, more specifically the song Black Dog. There's also a reverse photograph of Robert Plant and his wife Maureen, Jimmy's fantasy sequence and Stairway to Heaven solo, Peter Grant smoking a cigar, John Bonham riding his bike, and the shootout scene from a different perspective. These photographs were also included on several media press kits, along a list of credits and detailed information on the movie, plus a track listing. Now, these documents did not say additional stuff was shot at Shepperton Studios, so critics, audience members, and industry personnel were left with the sole narrative of concerts recorded at Madison Square Garden. Both Zeppelin movie premieres were scheduled for October 19th in New York City and the 21st in LA, with Led Zeppelin attending both events. All movie premiere proceeds were donated to the benefit of Save the Children Foundation. On October 8th, press release by Swan Song confirmed the rumors being true. A feature film by Led Zeppelin would hit cinemas in North America with concert footage, fantasy sequences, backstage stuff, and quote, a personal view of them at ease at home. Small portions of the movie were scheduled for Don Kirshner's rock concert, October through November. They played small clips of Black Dog and such. The band flew to New York City for the October 19th premiere of The Song Remains the Same. Movie director Joe Massot was not invited, but allegedly bought a ticket from his scalper outside and watched the film he was partially responsible for. Led Zeppelin stayed at the Plaza Hotel, where their People magazine photo was taken. Yes, this is the band the very same day they attended their feature film event. Quite the snapshot of the group in their latter-day period of tribulations and swan song energies. The same goes for this promotional shot with Jones and Plant looking a bit too serious. And now, my dear viewers, I want to share a very special story and connection to this world premiere. Many months ago, I got an awesome gift from a dear subscriber, Rick Milford. He sent me a letter where he shared incredible details as follows. He attended the July 27, 1973 show at Madison Square Garden. He was 15 years old. Rick said people wonder why there were cameramen shooting, quote, Jimmy's face and Robert's crotch. Rick saw Led Zeppelin at Madison Square Garden again in 1975 and twice in 1977. He saw the announcement for the October 19, 1976 premiere and went down with a friend to try and crash the film or after party at Hotel Pierre near the Plaza. They were unable to get in and saw many rock celebrities, but no Zeppelin sightings. So Rick and his friend went to a local bar to watch the Yankees lose Game 3. Then they went to Hotel Pierre, but were escorted out by security. Then something magic happened. Rick Milford saw a blondish haircut guy reach to his jacket pocket to hand him a folded ticket. "Here you go, mate," he said, and walked inside the hotel. That guy was Mick Ronson of Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars fame. His second solo album, Play Don't Worry, came out in January 1975. So Mick Ronson gave this very special ticket to Rick Milford. I want to say thank you once again, Rick, for this invaluable piece of rock and roll history that is kept safe on my 1976 Japanese copy of The Song Remains the Same. A second premiere was held at the Wilshire Theatre, Los Angeles, a venue of a long tradition with cinema. This is the day where some of the most well-known photographs of the band from this time period come from. You can see Bonzo wearing a hat in full 1975 mode. Quite the obligatory stop LA for some West Coast vibes, close to previous Malibu headquarters, where early sketches for Presence came to be. Peter Grant and Robert Plant were interviewed for the Old Grey Whistle test on the Thames River, and the show aired on November 2nd. Two movie premieres were held in the UK on November 4th and the 21st. Now, I'm not sure how the band felt about watching themselves for a third and fourth time, but it was their home country, with a list of special guests including Swan Song proteges Maggie Bell, Bad Company, The Pretty Things, and Dave Edmunds. Also present were Paul and Linda McCartney, Roy Harper, and Billy Connolly. Roy Harper, of course, can be seen on the movie many times. So what happened to director Peter Clifton, you ask? So this happened. He used a Swan Song chauffeur in LA to pick up some footage from 1973's The London Rock and Roll Show, a film he directed and produced. The chauffeur told Peter Grant that Clifton was bootlegging Zeppelin's movie. This, of course, was false, but it set things in motion for an angry Swan Song retaliation and Peter Grant's paranoia. Clifton's name was not included on The Song Remains the Same promotional materials, and according to the director, allegedly, a final payment of £12,000 was never made. Despite this, he presented each member of the band a reel of outtakes from the movie featuring them spending time with their families. Peter Grant believed Clifton had more footage in his house and allegedly sent a couple of Swan Song staff members to confiscate everything he had with the name Led Zeppelin. It was a sign of troubled 1977 times ahead, with Peter Grant running on aggression and impulse. Now, we should thank Peter Clifton for his enormous contribution and vision for the film. He wrote a script, found continuity, and actually directed the movie. The scene where we read a film by Peter Clifton and Joe Massot is wrong. They of course never met nor worked together, so it should read a film by Joe Massot, saved by Peter Clifton. Led Zeppelin allegedly made some $10 million within a year of the movie's release. Now let me discuss a New York moment. One of the best things about sharing episodes on the channel is how you guys share your own knowledge in the comment section to further expand the content. A fellow subscriber, and thank you very much for this, TJR's Classic Rock Corner, brought to my attention a fantastic observation from the movie that I believe is worth sharing. So he talked about the scene in Heartbreaker where we can see Times Square's own Lowe State Theater. The marquee shows the cinema was playing both The Godfather Part 2 and The Stepford Wives. Now this opens yet another door into Zeppelin's mysterious filming schedule. While Godfather Part 2 premiered on December 20th, 1974, The Stepford Wives was released on February 12th, 1975, the same day Led Zeppelin played their third and last show at Madison Square Garden on their 10th North American visit. This means this New York City footage was shot in 1975 and adds fuel to the idea of the band wanting to film their US shows in the fall that were cancelled. Here's some 1975 photographs that confirms the time period, judging by the billboard and setting. Living in a New York state of mind, a proper extension of the physical graffiti vibes. It seems the subconscious effect for fans was absolute. Led Zeppelin and the Big Apple was rock and roll. It's something like physical graffiti in motion, this movie, you know? I also want to clarify on a mistake I made on episode 1. So much information, my brain was probably on Zeppelin overload by the time I finished. I mentioned Benji Lefebvre talking to fans outside of Madison Square Garden, 1973, but it was in fact B.P. Fallon, whom we can also see on the Starship footage, a close member of the organization back then and a free spirit who was part of 70s rock and roll.
Robert, like when Robert did his stuff in Wales, the other members of the group were not there, you know,
and refused to pay for it at all.
And
if you walk off stage and find out that $203,000 have gone up the spout, it'd be pretty relevant. But that was it. It was a day in July. Really. We just, in fact, that we tried to find a title that would signify the fact that it was
That's
just
right,
that, wasn't it? You know? A day in July might have been a good title. A bit late in the day to change it.
The song Remains the Same saw worldwide releases in several countries including Japan, Germany, Argentina, and Brazil, with the movie's name translated accordingly. The movie also contributed to the huge ticket sales success of Led Zeppelin's 1977 North American tour, despite the mixed review responses for Presence. Now, what did the critics say about the movie? Noted New York critic Kathleen Carroll shared her impressions saying it was Dead Zeppelin. Quote, "The song Remains the Same is a hopelessly pretentious piece of trash, featuring the British rock group The Led Zeppelin, in what is laughably called a performance. The constant screeching of Zeppelin's bare-chested, straggly-haired lead singer Robert Plant make this a film that would be tolerated only by tone-deaf teenagers." I'm guessing Mrs. Carroll was related to Pete Townsend, right? The original theatrical trailer features several scenes to the sound of Hotel Love live at Madison Square Garden. Scenes from the gangster shootout were included, plus quick band member close-ups to the sound of the final section for Dazed and Confused. Jonesy's Midnight Shot was included for a very strange trailer that should have used more bits from the fantasy sequences for a backstory. Maybe use Robert Plant's backstage words, you know? So I decided to do my own version of the trailer. Here it is.
This is a song that sometimes takes a building in a manner which our forefathers were very used to.
Zeppelin, the legend, the music of moving. Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, and again at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Past Led Zeppelin's tragic finale in 1980, the song Remains the Same became the main video source to captivate new legions of fans, with early VHS releases as far back as 1984, and further re-releases in 1991 and 1997, which is a version I have. The band couldn't do any edits to the original movie out of terms and conditions with Warner Brothers. This is why no alterations to the footage can be made. Because they had a distribution deal, it means that the film has to remain intact so Warner Brothers can keep selling the movie, both physical media and streaming platforms. Even if they wanted to add more footage, they would have to sit down with Warner Brothers executives, and based on Frank Zappa's experience, it's not a fun meeting. Besides collectible picture disc editions, there was a 1999 DVD cut with no bonus material. Jimmy Page added some movie outtakes on the 2003 Led Zeppelin DVD, which had Zeppelin fans, including myself, going full speed on the hamster wheel at the thought of additional material: Misty Mountain Hop and The Ocean. The reunion show Frenzy of 2007 led to a 2-disc special edition, adding more precious extras. Now, Celebration Day does feature a big portion of footage from the actual New York concert, which makes for a great addition to the movie experience. Now you wonder why they included this on the soundtrack instead of the movie. I think it belonged right after rock and roll, following their setlist at Madison Square Garden. Jimmy Page dancing like a madman is worth the price of admission. He really enjoys this song. It's almost as if he's floating on stage. Also included here was the original trailer for the movie, the Old Grey Whistle Test interview, a Tampa 1973 news report on Led Zeppelin breaking the Beatles record, Peter Grant's Drake Hotel press conference, and a very special staged disassembled time-lapse video that really puts into perspective the dimensions of 70s concerts. Madison Square Garden holds a special vibe that was greatly captured here. Now let me discuss the bonus tracks real quick. Over the Hills and Far Away was made up of mostly Shepperton Studios footage, which is quite obvious on Jimmy's intro. There's also many recycled shots from Dazed and Confused, so it's a bit of a letdown for the experienced Zeppelin fan. It also makes you think that Joe Massad and his crew didn't really film this song at all back in New York City. Remember the missing gaps in the footage? Well, this proves this song was completely missed by the crew. Now, a similar fate happened to Misty Mountain Hop, but in reverse. With plenty of concert footage without much use of Shepperton, we get to see John Paul Jones's 1973 hairstyle without the infamous wig. Funny how the film crew did a fairly good job on this number instead of the others. Not the most memorable from the setlist though. Now, the monster surprise was of course The Ocean. Not only does it sound amazing, but the visuals really help as they are extracted from Madison Square Garden footage with little to no Shepperton stuff. It's as live as it gets. John Bonham steals the show here with everything from his introduction to the drumming to the singing in the middle. This should have been on the movie. It's yet another Houses of the Holy number that sounds so much better than the album. It was made for concerts, and I think it was a lost opportunity not putting it in the final release. You can also appreciate Jimmy's showmanship. Check out his right hand as he plays the riff. Now, the song was a great encore on what seems to be closing night, July 29th, based on John Paul Jones's clothes. Fun fact, a witty reporter asked the band on their Celebration Day press conference if the reunion show had a fantasy sequence like their 1976 film.
Yeah, I'm Nick from Q and Kerrang Radio. I just wanted to know, hypothetically, had you made some cutscenes like in The Song Remains the Same, what fantasy sequences might have represented you individually in 2012?
We got enough time for that one.
Maybe the whole concert was a fantasy sequence, really.
I think it was. I think going down the river on a boat was already the beginning of it. When we got to the O2 by boat, you know, I saw Arthur, I saw Guinevere, I saw, you know, there was the 3 princesses.
What was in your tea?
What?
What was in your tea?
Some of it won't go away.
A rock and roll cult classic. No band interviews, no oversharing. It's magic realism, like Alejandro Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain meets Woodstock. You don't need much explanation but to witness the definition of group chemistry. Maybe the visuals look dated now, but what 70s movie doesn't to an extent, being this part of its magic? a time and place never to be repeated. Yes, Robert Plant's boat has no motor nor sails, yet it moves quite fast. But maybe, just maybe, it was the cosmic energy he talked about. Where most bands have MTV music videos and such, Led Zeppelin has a movie that makes sense in making no sense, thus underlying the most important part of their success: the music, addictive sounds, riffs, chords, lyrics, grooves, everything. A concert offering that leaves no stone untouched, a poem in motion, a time capsule of fame. The song remains the same. But what about the story of the soundtrack for the film, the double album? Yeah, stay tuned for episode 3, as I will unravel the secrets behind its creation. And it's not the same music as the movie, but a different beast altogether. See you next week. Bye bye.